Fitz Koehler, and I am back with the Wasdin Speaker Series as part of the University of Florida's College of Health and Human Performance and their Sport Management Department. That's where I earned my master's, and I couldn't be prouder of it. Go Gators. I'm going to start off with one of these today. Today, I have a really neat guest. Her name is Dr. Jen Welter, and usually when we hear doctor, we think of medicine and needles and pokes, and I'm sure she's needled some people in other ways throughout her career, but she actually is the first female coach in the NFL, and that was for the Arizona Cardinals, which is pretty cool. And I think even being a guy coaching in the NFL is pretty cool. So the fact that she made it all the way there in what I'm going to call the secret underground world of women's football. And as many of you know, I'm no stranger to sports. I make a career out of it. I was a competitive kickboxer for 10 years. So I was a girl who did something interesting, and maybe it's considered a man's sport. I just consider it a sport. But as I've researched and learned more about Jen, what I found is that there's actually women's tackle football leagues. And I had no idea this was going on, which blows me away. So I'm excited to bring Jen to you. We're gonna have a good discussion. If you have any questions, please use your comment section. We're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And if you use your comments section, we should be able to see some of those questions. I've got my intern, Sydney Summers, producing, so she should bring us those questions when we're ready for them. But Sydney, go ahead and let's bring on Dr. Jen Welter. Hey, Jen.
Hey, how we doing?
I'm great, and I think you're probably the coach in the NFL with the most glamorous eyeshadow.
You know, I just think sometimes you have to do it up, have a little fun with it. Because I'm proud to be a girl who coaches, right? It's not, I know that some people say you can't have that dichotomy. I absolutely embrace it. I think it's important. And I think young girls need to see it, right? You can absolutely go out and literally tackle anybody, tackle the world, and feel good about yourself and enjoy playing around with makeup.
I love that. When I was fighting back in the day, and I spent a good 10 years, I never found the need to kind of guy myself up. I like being able to kick someone in the head in the ring and then put on a sundress and go to a restaurant and have the boys open the door. And I think there's a full privilege for us to be both a full woman and a full-blown athlete, no matter how gritty we get within our sport. And you certainly, I've watched some of your interviews, and you always look beautiful.
Well, thank you. I just think it's fun, right? I always say it's like playing dress up.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. It's not all the time, but there's no reason why I can't do that and be somebody in football. If you don't want to, then don't. Right. But if you do, then do. It's all about finding yourself in this crazy world. And as I say, loving your brand of crazy.
Yeah. So I really have got to plead ignorance that I went looking and I found so much on women's football. And honestly, I've just never seen it before. And I've also seen that you've earned gold medals with Team USA. And all I'm trying to imagine is a bunch of Norwegian chicks and chicks from Singapore in American football uniforms, tackle football. Tell us about this society, secret society you're part of.
Yeah, so I started playing women's tackle football not long after college, right? So I got recruited from a flag league I was playing in, and they called the league and actually said, do you have any girls who are playing flag that you think could play tackle? And full disclosure, having played rugby in college, I never really stopped tackling. So they were probably like, get rid of her. Yes, take her. Made that team. And to me, that was it, right? But there are women playing football all over the country. This modern iteration of women's tackle football started around 2000. There have been several leagues in that time. Now you look at the major leagues being the WPFL, oh my gosh, that's the first league I played in. That shows you how long I've been doing this. But the major leagues now are the WNFC and the WFA. And then the first time, so you asked about Team USA. So when we started, there was no such thing as Team USA. The first U.S. national team was fielded in 2010. And as I like to say, it was 45 of the best women in this country who have ever played the game. We ended up getting to go to training camp in Round Rock, Texas in June. And these boys now aren't allowed to do 2-a-days in the NFL anymore, practice CBA and all that stuff. We had 3-a-days, and we had, a very short time to come together as a team. And oh, by the way, play all teams we had no game film on, right? Nobody knew what the rest of the world was going to look like. And so that experience to me was probably one of the coolest of my life. And it's interesting because when I tell people the story, I'm like, I want you to understand what that call was like. Congratulations, Jen Welter. You're one of the best 45 players in the United States, and we would argue the world. And you're going to get a chance to join the first U.S. national team and play for a gold medal. Now, here's what we need you to do. You're going to have to take about a month off work and cut us a check for $3,000. Women in football still has a long way to go, right? They call it the final frontier for women in sports. And I'm not surprised because it's the only sport that doesn't have parity at any level, right? From peewees all the way up to the highest level of the pros. And so, I always tell people, if we're talking about equal work, equal pay for equal work, the most I ever made as a woman playing tackle football was $1 a game. So we've got a long way to go. But because it is, in my mind, American football, right? And it's only been for half of America at most. I always kind of thought about it as like, when we can win here, we can not only change football, but we can change society through football. And, that I think is a shared mentality for a lot of the women that play, because that's still the sport that's kind of, even MMA, like you were talking about, has become more mainstream than the sport claimed as American football.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I want to hit on, but let's start with you being one of the 45 best in America, and we call it American football. I don't really see a lot of Germans rocking it with American football. We get a lot of European basketball players and baseball players from all over the world, but our best are always American boys. So what's going on in the rest of the world with women's football? This is very intriguing to me.
It is. So Germany has actually played football for a very long time over there. They are, I want to say they had been playing for like 20 years. So they were.
Do we have any native Germans in the NFL?
Well, I mean, they have men's football over there too, but I was talking about the women specifically. And so they were kind of like, our coaches, this is the best way I can put it. You remember the fight when Rocky was fighting Drago? Mm-hmm. Right? She's not a machine, Rocky. Okay, our coaches played us that movie because we didn't know what we were going to face. So we just had to think about like Americans versus Germans. Right. And they were by far the biggest team I've ever seen in my life. When I saw them run out on the field because they were playing somebody else and we were there, I looked at my friends and I was like, they're the villains in our movie, right? Because they were giant and they were all wearing black. Turns out that actually Team USA was by far the dominant one, and we did win the gold. But when they ran out on that field, boy, I was like, oh. So in its IFAF, so International Federation of American Football, Women's World Championship, there were 6 teams. It was in Stockholm, Sweden, and the teams were Finland, Austria, Germany, Sweden, Canada, and America. Okay. And next time there was no Austria, and then it might have been the same. No, I think Austria. Oh no, Austria was out. Mexico was in for the third one. I don't remember about the second one, and then because it might have been the same, but then in the third one, Australia was in there, and so was Mexico. So you have women competing all over the world. But it's really tough because it's a high dollar sport. Getting gear is really hard, and getting coaching is really tough.
So putting the past weird year aside, is women's football globally doing well? Is it growing?
It's definitely growing. And flag is also a really fast growing part of football because the barriers to entry aren't as high, both in terms of risk for injury and dollars. So you'll see that women's tackle football is growing internationally. It's definitely the biggest here in the States. Canada would be second. But flag football is one of the fastest growing sports for women, both in the US and globally as well.
So back to you personally. So you played running back. And so we have a bunch of women that are,
I played running back in men's pro football. I played mostly defense in women's football.
Okay. So yeah, and I hate to even call it men's football. It's just football. I don't think there's a rule that says no chicks allowed. They just don't typically make the teams, correct?
Well, I was the first woman to play running back in men's pro football. So it doesn't really happen, but it has happened a lot. And you've also seen kickers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Most are kickers. So you're the fierce 5'2" thing, knocking down the boys. And I was talking about you with my son last night, and he said, "Mom, is she big?" I said, "Park. She's 5'2". And I showed him your picture. He goes, "Oh, she's buff." I said, "That's right. She's small but mighty." So tell us about playing running back and knocking down the boys.
I did not set out to play men's pro football. That's the first thing I would say. The team, the Texas Revolution, actually came to me. They wanted to meet with me. So I went to their office. I'm going to tell y'all, very true story. I wore really tall shoes that day. I was going to be at least 5'4" when I walked in the door. Okay. Had to happen. But when I sat down, the president of the team essentially said that they thought it would be amazing if I would go through a day of training camp with their guys. And, immediately I was like, oh, okay. So let me get this straight. You want me to come in and smile for the cameras and catch some passes, run some ladder drills, that kind of stuff? He's like, yeah, we think it would be amazing. Get some really good pub. And I was like, absolutely not. Actually, that's really insulting to me as somebody who just won my second gold medal. And if I was anyone on the guys on your team, I would absolutely hate it. If you want to do anything with me and your football team, I either do everything that they do, step for step, hit for hit, step for step, hit for hit for all of training camp, or I do nothing at all. And as soon as I said it, I was like I knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was happening. And then I might have gotten myself killed, right? I had no delusions of grandeur in this, but I wasn't going to let them use me as a publicity stunt, right? It was too important. Women had been sacrificing too much for too long to, just go out there and play at football. And so, I ended up not only being with the team for all of training camp, but for all of the season, though I was on practice squad for some of the games, right? It was definitely scratching and clawing and fighting not to get cut or to get killed. But they knew, you're going to have to cut me or kill me because I'm not quitting no matter what. And in the process, what happened is I really earned the respect of the players and we became really close. And then the following season, when they had a new head coach, Wendell Davis, he saw how we were together, grilled me on football, and then the next day called me and said, "You have to coach my football team." And I said, "No." And he said, "What do you mean no?" And I said, "No, girls don't coach football. I'm not going to do that." It was just instinctual because there was nobody I could look at and say, I want to do what she's doing. And he said, "Not a lot of guys are going to give you this opportunity. You're taking this job." And I said no. And I hung up on him. And the next day he called me back and told me about myself. He said, "Do you remember how I told you not a lot of guys were going to give you this opportunity? You were taking this job?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good. I took it for you. you're coaching for me. And by the way, you can't quit. Otherwise, the entire narrative surrounding women coaching in men's pro football will be, we had a girl once and she quit.
I like it.
I like him a lot. And, I tell people that story because, often we see things that people do and we see them as really big and we think this person had no fear or always was driven and always knew that this was going to happen after this. And I really didn't. And yet that's one of the things we see with women is we don't often project ourselves up into situations the same way that guys will, right? We want to overcheck the boxes to make sure that we already know that we're good enough before we go into those situations. Whereas, guys, it's not the same, right? Guys are like, oh yeah, I could do that, right? It's no problem. And so I think it's really important that we have those conversations and we do kind of admit that because, Wendell drop kicked me into success. He saw something in me before I even saw it in myself. And, I'm so grateful for that.
So this is interesting. And it's something where I think you and I, we probably have in common. And then, I feel like I can learn from you because I don't want to be a token anything. I don't think my reproductive organs have any impact on my professional capabilities. And so on occasion, a race director will say, hey, Fitz, wanted to reach out. We're looking at having a female voice. Would you be interested in announcing our race? And I go, listen, if you're looking for a female, there's millions of them running around. If you want the best announcer, we can talk. And so there's that dichotomy between wanting to do the work and then not wanting to be considered a token anything. I don't believe in hiring based off of, physical traits. It's got to be merit, So how are you compartmentalizing your life in that regard? Because you are now, I advertise you as the first female coach in the NFL. So how do you work around that?
I don't. I do like to claim that I was female because we do need to see it, right? Because if you don't have that representation, it's harder for the next person. So I am very much female and I'm proud of that, and it's not going to be a secret when I walk in the door. So I don't think I get jobs because of that, but I might be a different consideration in some situations where they maybe haven't had a female voice before, because that's really common. And I will kind of be like, hey, you do realize like half your fans are female. So maybe having someone who knows the game and they can relate to is actually a strategic advantage, right? And gender can be an advantage, right? And so I don't think of it as like I'm getting it because of that, because I'm obviously qualified, but it is important to break down some of those barriers and to be intentional about inclusion, because otherwise, not everybody wants to see those things change. So when you get people who are willing to, push past some of those stereotypes and do something different, I think it's up to the woman to make sure that you're not token and that you don't do damage. But I am proud of being a woman in that situation, especially having been first, because that wasn't possible until it was.
Yeah, well, you've done a fine job. So we've got a question from Rudy Novotny. He's actually my favorite announcing partner, one of my best friends. Thank you, Dr. Welter, for all you're doing to support women's sports. How do you feel about transgender athletes in women's sports, professional, collegiate, and Olympic level competition? Well, go for it.
I don't think that I'm necessarily qualified to make that judgment. And I don't think it's a blanket statement either, right? I think we're going to do more harm than good if we say at all levels and in all situations, this is right or wrong. I think there has to be long-term research. I think we have to look at, a lot of it comes down to the hormonal impact on musculature, right? Like if you talk about differences. And so I think when somebody is within their transition, what age that was, how soon it was based on testosterone, I think I I don't know enough to make that determination. And I think it's really important that we consider everybody and how they identify and how we can make sports inclusive for everybody to find their place in their space, which means we're going to have some of these conversations and really have an open mind and an open heart and look at them from a scientific standpoint and a psychological standpoint, and really come up with the best solution. Because I know, people are worried that, it's going to happen all over the place. I think I can't say that I could judge somebody as right or wrong in that situation unless I knew, a whole lot more.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. I know a lot of people, they look at, there's been a big issues within track and field. And then I instantly go into a combat sport. I trained with men all the time. In fact, I'd say 90% of my training partners, when we were sparring, preparing for a match, were men, and they were great. And even if I was 112 pounds and they were 200 pounds, we would go tit for tat with skill, but they wouldn't pummel me, which I appreciated. And that's why fight sports are compartmentalized by weight. But I did have a guy, one man who was my side, Lane. He was 112 as well. And man, he just packed so much power, so much more power than any of the women I had ever faced. He just was a dense, muscular, fast. I was smarter than him, and I was maybe a little more strategic. But man, he just hit harder. He had this natural capability I didn't. So again, I really care about everyone, and I don't think sports are political. I want everyone to participate and be active and be healthy and have fun. But yeah, there's definitely some tricks to it, right? It's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah. And how it can really best be for everyone, right? And that we create situations where we are inclusive and we are also fair.
Yeah. No, with football, so women are trickling into both Division I and the NFL. Quite often as a placeholder, kicker, whatever, they're in there and they're living the high life of a pro football player, which is great. Do you think there'll ever be a time where, a Mean Joe Green type guy is welcomed into the women's football league?
So I always go back to the reason why you see most of the time, why you see women going into either playing in high school or college on a men's team, is because there's not an option, right? There's not another option. There isn't women's football. And if the only place to play is women playing in men's football, then, that's where you have, they should let them play, right? But if there's another place, right? There are men's leagues. So I don't understand why.
Imagine some guy kicking and screaming.
Right. But again, you have to look at everything in every scenario and just say, first of all, what are the tenets of the league? How is that set up? And what were those decisions? And then how does that follow through in all of the decisions that you make? But I think the likelihood of seeing, a guy who really wanted to play in women's football, I don't know, because if he was, if he had the opportunity to play on a men's team or whatever, unless you're talking about gender identity, and then that would really go to the tenets of the league. Again, I'm definitely not the person who's making those decisions. So I try not to weigh in on things that aren't really in my bandwidth or skill set, right? I think that's where we lose credibility, is when I try to claim to be an expert about something that I'm just not informed enough to be able to make that decision.
That's right. Well, that was a good question there, Rudy. Well thought out. Way to bring it up. So you're obviously a tremendous athlete and a coach, and now you're in the business side of things, and you founded GrrridIron Girls. Before we get to GrrridIron Girls, tell me about you as a business person and how sports have helped you develop as someone negotiating deals, et cetera.
I think it's interesting being a woman in sports, especially how I came up, because they're, you know, I always say it was a full-time hustle. You had to have like 47 jobs in order to make it work. And that's the blessing and the curse of being a woman in sports. You have to do everything, but then again, you have to learn everything too. And so that's a lot of what I was doing throughout my career and continue to do was, you know, whether it was the marketing or branding or being a football player, even if the world wasn't ready for a woman being a football player necessarily. So that was always something I did. And now a lot of the business that I do is really looking at the space where something doesn't exist and how do we course correct, or how do we become more inclusive, or, you know, where can we change maybe the conversation surrounding women in football? And that's, and I think that's really important. So having been immersed in it for a long time, and also being, you know, having a PhD and a master's in sports psychology, I definitely look at situations, I think through a different lens. And I'm always trying to solve problems. And sometimes that means, you know, you've got to start your own business. There weren't camps for girls. Okay, well, that means we got to start it, right? As opposed to doing what I would have done before that, which was try to get somebody else to do it. And I think that a lot of the other stuff, you really find the right people to surround yourself with, and kind of learn on your feet.
So on the learning on your feet thing, and I did a lot of that, and I made a lot of stupid mistakes, and they're the best things for me, and I'll never make those mistakes again. What have been yours?
Gosh, there's a lot. First, you know, I think the big one is sometimes trusting the wrong people. You know, I had somebody who was supposed to be doing contract stuff for me at one point, and I found out later that she was rewriting the contracts for a lower dollar amount, and I was paying her a commission on what she was making. So she was pocketing money, and then I was paying her a commission. So I was getting quite ripped off, and it hurt trust-wise for a long time too. She also kept me isolated from, you know, having any of those direct conversations. So I'd never be able to figure it out. Right. I think that's an important thing when you're working with honest people. They don't have a lot to hide from you. Dishonest people will try and keep you separated from other people who would give you another voice or another opinion. So that's something, whether it's in business or in life, like those people who want to keep you divided from a support system, it's not healthy. And so that was a big mistake, is trusting the wrong people. And then that probably that probably swung me too much in the other way for a while, where, you know, I had second thoughts about everybody, right? It's hard after you get hurt. It's hard after you get burned to bring somebody or people in close again, because if they're not that close, they can't necessarily hurt you as bad. And so a lot of the stuff that I've had to do was figuring it out on my own, out of one, necessity, because nobody else was doing what I was doing, but two, out of some of those bad experiences, you know, right off the jump. And so I think those are probably two of the biggest. Another one I would say is, you know, I have a real tendency to help people, right? Like I want to make it happen. I want to do it. Yes. You know, here's how you do it. And I've done that a couple of times. And then as one of my friends said the other day, what I didn't do is build myself into the solution that I created. So I created a solution, but then they were able to go around me and do it because I didn't make myself integral to the solution. So I think that's something that I have to get better at too, just because I want to help and am trusting that other people are going to, you know, operate in that same way. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have the same ethos. And I think people have to kind of prove that to you. And if you're going to do it with no expectation, then don't be surprised when they really don't consider you, right? And I think that has been tough at times too.
Yeah, that's great feedback. We do have a lot of our sports management students tuning in, watching. So, we love sports. We want to be involved in these situations, but it's not all puppies and rainbows all the time. You have to look out.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's there are great people around it, and there are not great people, and that's why you see athletes that they say, well, oh, okay, he lost all his money or he did this or that. That's not necessarily him in and of himself. That's the circle, right? And the circle, whether it's financial advisors, whether it's people you grew up with, whatever it is, like we have to do a good job of like huddling up with the right people.
Absolutely. I learned early, always associate up. And so I seek out people I deem better than myself.
Yep.
And go that route. If I can look up to them, admire them, and feel like they're on a better track than I am, then we can hang in that.
Yeah. I want everybody around me to be better at me than what they're great at, right? And that means it's going to level all of us up. And people laugh because when when I know something, I will tell you, right? This is what it is, boom, boom, boom. If I don't, just like earlier in the interview, I'm like, I'm not qualified to make that decision.
Yeah.
I'm not informed on all aspects. And somebody who has a lot more working knowledge should speak to it, right? So why am I giving an opinion? If we give an opinion about everything, then your opinion really doesn't mean anything if it's not a good one, right?
Like, they can hang you with it too. It's a dangerous time to speak your mind about much, even if you're just taking a stab at it, right?
Right.
All right. So Michael Jones has a question. What advice do you have for men in how we can empower and support women advancing professionally, and what should men avoid doing? I like that.
Yeah. So for the men, be intentional. Like I talk to, say, dads of daughters all the time, and they say, how do I make sure that, my daughter has the confidence to pursue her sport and things like that? And I say, seek out great women that you can position her to be exposed to, right? If 4% of the media or sports media coverage goes to women in sports, then the likelihood of her finding those women on her own is a lot lower, but they're there. So you can show her some of these amazing women. You can be intentional about facilitating those conversations. And so that's one on the, on the micro level, right? From the dad level, make sure that you're seeking out those opportunities. You're intentionally making sure that your daughter has women that she can look to and those stories, because they are not mainstream to the extent that the guys are. There are not as many posters. There's not as many jerseys. So you're going to have to seek them out, right? And teach her that they're there, right? And teach her that sports are doing better, right? But that part won't just naturally happen as easy because of the exposure. Then in terms of, how do we change women's sports? Again, we have to spend money with them, right? We need to make the dollars make sense. The pushback you always get is generally financial, right? Oh, women's sports aren't profitable, or, it's not good business. It is good business. It depends on what your business is, though. So whether it's sponsorships or, taking your daughter to a game, or, I'm going to go and watch, or I'm going to even share stories, right? It doesn't always have to be big, but we need to do all of the work, right? And the work starts as levels of, if these are the women that you want your daughters to see, and you want the next generation, you want your daughters to grow up with these things, because you may not have experienced it through your own experience as a guy, but you can understand it through the eyes of your daughter, through the eyes of your sister, through the eyes of other women, right? And if you want them to have a better future than we're in right now, then we have to do the work, right? We have to start upping the profile of women's sports and the women in it, right? And that means we need dollars. That means we need training. That means we need opportunities on par with the guys. And that requires a village, and it really does require intentionality, right? We have to make those investments of time, energy, and finances.
Yeah, well said. So 2 questions. What woman/women reached out for you to help you rise? And then have you dealt with mean girls? What has it been like for you?
I would say two of the women who really have been like that for me. Nancy Lieberman is one. She has been like a friend, sister, mentor for years, right? And we'll sometimes talk about things that I don't know who else would understand it, right? Because there wasn't any other woman in football in my position, but a lot of the things that I went through in football, she had gone through, in basketball. So
I don't know who Nancy Lieberman is. Who is she?
Nancy Lieberman? Oh, Nancy Lieberman. You don't know who she is?
I don't.
Oh, she is a legend in basketball. She is actually a coach in the Big Three for Ice Cube now. She's one of the head coaches. She's been 2 years in a row. She used to be a head coach of the D League team in Dallas. Sorry. And she played in the D League team back in the day. So Nancy Lieberman, in terms of basketball, has been the one consistently moving the needle for women. She also does on-air analysis for the Pelicans. I mean, she is the woman, right? I say if I could have the impact in football that she's had in basketball, that would be really huge. I've had a lot of women's reach out, kind of sister sports, right? I don't know if it's necessarily to rise you up, but really kind of to lock arms, right? To know that you're supported. All of the women in football are very supportive in terms of the women that I played with. And then, Kendall Coyne from hockey, Nat Spooner. I'm a part of the She Is Collective, which is a pledge for powerful women in sports to amplify each other. And I've been in that since it started. I was one of their founding women. And so just a lot of I'm very big on cross-pollination and how we can do that for each other, right? I haven't played tennis since, high school, but I can still go to the US Open and shout out those amazing women. And, we need to do that as women through our different platforms. So that collective of women has been one of the places where I've really, been able to meet and engage with, some of the other women, Stephanie McMahon, WWE was part of it. And we all went to the Evolution, when it first kicked off, to support that. So really good to see those kinds of things opening up. And then, when you talk about mean girls, yes, I mean, there are. And I don't think we talk about that enough, right? Because we say women have to support each other. What I have found is that women are either the absolute best or they're not, right? And, and I hate to say that because it breaks my heart, right? I don't ever want to feel that way. And yet, you do find out that not everybody thinks about it the way that you do, right? I am surprised sometimes that information comes back to me, because I know so many people. And it's when I hear of someone who there's no reason, I may not even have met them, right? I can think of an example of a woman I haven't even met. And she was in a coaching meeting talking badly about me. Never met her. So why is my name on your lips? What could I have possibly done to you? And it doesn't hurt anyone except for women, right? Because in a place, in a space where she was the only woman in that room, her talking about me to people I knew hurt her. It didn't hurt me. It hurt her. And it doesn't help women as a whole. What are you trying to accomplish? There may be some people that I don't necessarily agree with 100% on certain things, but we can have a private conversation, right? And yet publicly, I'm still going to be proud of you, right? Because we do need that, right? Like, it's kind of like that cousin in your family that they drive you nuts, but they're still family, right? You still need to have a little bit more of that. And it unfortunately just comes down to the scarcity that we've been taught to think of as women, that there's only one seat at the table, right?
That's it.
Yep. That it's me or her, and that there's only room for like one sport to shine or this, right? Like, somebody who wants to watch tennis maybe isn't going to like football, but I haven't lost them, right? Like if they like football, they can like tennis too. Like it's a good thing. And it, unfortunately, it's that scarcity, number one, and it's insecurity, number two.
So this is something interesting. So I've had quite a few mean girl experiences, and one within the past few years, and boy, were they after me. And I just decided I'm going to let my work speak for itself and not address it. I don't want to be tangled in the drama. So I'm just going to keep my nose down and do what I do. And I didn't address it. I just didn't address it. And it almost blew up in my face that I didn't address it. And then I just heard someone else making a case for head-on confrontation. You're saying this about me, blah, blah, blah. What's your gut instinct on how to handle mean girls, mean guys, whatever, someone talking trash about Jen?
I think a one-on-one conversation, right? Like, I don't, all of this public stuff or group stuff, it's just going to amplify, right? Like if I had a chance to just talk about it, I'm like, hey, what did I do to offend you so much? Like if I did something, I'll know it and I'll apologize, right? Like I tell people all the time, I am certainly not perfect. And at times I am overworked or I am short. And, all I need to know is that something happened. And if you say like, that was rude, I'll be like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Don't take it to the grave. Don't, take it to your next conversation. Talk to me about it and give me the opportunity to either, become like, make it up to you or to just own that I'm a jerk, right? Like, because that's fine too. Like some people will be like, I don't really care. And they'd be like, oh, right. But I think this problem that we have of bringing other people into the drama or the chaos, that's where it just keeps going, right? And either lean into it or realize that it's not really important to you. And I don't think that I have the luxury to get into the weeds of some of that stuff. It may drive me crazy.
Right.
It may make me want to pull my hair out at times. It may actually really hurt me deeply. But there is a bigger picture. And that's what I try to challenge myself to do. I think, and trying to challenge myself to do is tough because I was a football player and sometimes you just want to tackle people. It's a lot easier on a football field, right? Like just put the pads on, right? Like that used to always be my answer. Put the pads on, we'll handle it, right? I can handle anything on a football field. Life, you have a little bit more finesse.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Beth wants to know, what can we do for our young girls to encourage them to live their passion in sport and have the self-confidence to pursue her dreams no matter what obstacles come up, including mean girls? Great question, Beth.
Beth, I think a lot of it is about preparing them, right? And I'll use GrrridIron Girls as an example.
Thanks.
When I started doing GrrridIron Girls, it was because, first of all, I'd had so many girls reach out and be like, thank you for making me not feel wrong for loving football. Then I saw situations where I was, guest coaching at camps and they would claim co-ed, but the co-ed was in a camp of 200, maybe 4 girls, and they thought they were doing really well, right? And yet it'd be between 0 and 2% girls, right? And so, and those girls that were there often didn't have a good experience because they weren't socialized into football the way the boys were, meaning they hadn't been taught how to throw properly or how to catch. Now, some of them would, right? They'd be the ones that, their family was rough and tumble. But for most girls, right, they maybe had never been taught how to throw a football or even grip a football for that matter. And then you go into a situation where the boys have been socialized and the girls haven't. And then when a girl is fundamentally at a disadvantage there, not because of capability, but just because of access, then when she would, go to throw the football, what would they say? Oh, she throws like a girl. No, there's not actually throwing like a girl. There's either throwing a football like you've been taught or not. But if the assumption or the situation then goes, you can't do this because you're a girl, then that sport becomes something off limits, right? And so I do believe in co-ed situations. I don't think that girls need to necessarily be separated all the time. But what we found like with GrrridIron Girls, for example, is, girls didn't mind playing on an all-girls team against the boys. What they minded was being on a co-ed team and not getting thrown to by the boys. It's not fun, right? So they want to be engaged, and it's not about whether it's boys and girls. It's about having an opportunity to be good, getting all the things that you need to be a good football player, not because, not being at a disadvantage because you're a girl. So GrrridIron Girls, we would teach them all that stuff to make sure they had a great football experience. And then they could step into co-ed if they wanted to, or play street ball because they knew how to do all the fundamentals. And we start them with the confidence and intention that, as I say, this confidence through football, right? Even if you decide you don't want to play football anymore, that's okay. But you know that you could go out there and catch it, right? Yeah. You know you could go throw it, right? Yeah.
So tell me, where's GrrridIron Girls? Where does a mom, a dad sign their daughter up?
So we work with organizations to bring camps into areas. That's what it is. So if a local organization wants to come in, we would find how that structure is. Generally, we like the camps to be set up for free because it's hard to get a girl to pay for something she doesn't know that she wants, which would mean like a sponsor bringing us in to then do a GrrridIron Girls camp. We also have a partnership with Adidas where they fund a certain amount of camps a year, which is exciting. And we're always looking for more partners because it's so important, right? I mean, you can charge for the camps, but then you're not necessarily reaching the ones who are going to benefit the most. And I have a policy. I'd never turn a kid away because of money. So when we first did them for $40 a camp, I remember my turning point. We had brought in a group that was in like a gang reintegration program. We had another one, which was a house for kids who had lost their parents. And so we have these two big groups in there, and such a wonderful experience for the kids. And then another group of kids that, they couldn't afford it either. And I had one of my college friends who was like, yeah, here's the $40. And I was like, what am I doing? Right. I don't want anybody to miss that experience. So really the best way to do it is to have a sponsor bring us in so that it can be a free community event.
So interestingly enough, I own a kids school walking running program called the Morning Mile, and we charge 0 kids ever. We've had millions of kids participate. It's all sponsored by, Under Armour or the local bakery. It doesn't matter to me. It's generous individuals and corporations. They pay the bill, and then the school doesn't have to nickel and dime fitness activities. They say, hey, it was gifted to us. We can implement it. And I'm like you, everybody's invited, period, end of story. We exclude nobody, and kids deserve a right to play, be active, and it will make them so much better as productive grown-ups and parents. It all matters.
Yep. And to that question on, how do we give our girls those opportunities, things like this or that, right? And, I do this because then I get to be out there. I get to actually be that female mentor because, I remember working with the Keep Playing Like a Girl campaign, and I authored some of the literature And there were several stats that stood out to me, right? Half of girls will opt out of sports by the time they finish puberty. When asked, right? 7 out of 10 girls said they didn't feel supported in sports. 7 out of 10 girls felt that society didn't support them in sports. And 7 out of 10 girls felt there were not enough visible female role models. Well, of course they're going to drop out, right? You don't see women in sports the same way as you see guys in sports. The opportunities are not necessarily there. And the women in sports haven't been treated in the same way as the guys, right? And so when you don't have women in sports on the same platform as the guys, what we're also saying is that the women who are put on those platforms are what? They're Kardashians, or they're housewives, or they're these things that are, it's all fine, but they're an accessory to someone else's success, not the entity to success. So we're telling them sports are okay, but it's not as okay as it is for the guys.
Yeah. Well, Jen, I got to tell you that I'm grateful for you. And the more I hear out of your mouth, the more I like you. And Brian Kilmeade wrote a book long time ago called The Games Do Count. And I truly believe that. And when it comes to sports and fitness, such a small percentage of any child going forward will play professionally, but they will take those skills and those habits they learn to become, better professionals, whether they're window cleaners or they're CEOs or teachers. They really matter. So I'm grateful you're impacting so many children, not just girls, and women, of course.
Yeah. And we actually have a policy at GrrridIron Girls too. The boys are welcome. Yeah. And it's interesting because I always had people ask me, and the way that evolved was really organically. It was, I had a mom or a couple of moms who were out there bringing their daughters, and their sons were with them. And I would go over to the sons. I'd be like, you want to play? Oh, I thought it was for girls. Listen, if you are cool enough to want to come and support your sister in football, we want you. Really? Yes, absolutely. It's my camp. I get to make the rules, right?
Example, right?
That's right. And I would tell the girls that I do this partially because I didn't have this opportunity when I was your age, and we've got to do better. Like, I didn't get to play your age because I was a girl. So I'm not going to do the same thing to the boys, right? But then they also know that they've come into the situation where it's for the girls, right? And, I can make sure that they're going to be good advocates in that situation, but I won't advertise it as co-ed because a lot of the girls won't go if it's co-ed.
Right. No, leading by example. All right. So we're going to go into a little bit of fun, quick lightning round questions. If you ever you've been through a lot, but these are pretty rough questions. Sorry, Rudy, we're going to miss your question. We're going to have to invite Jen back for number 2 one day. All right. So for starters, what's the best nickname you ever received?
Buffy the Quarterback Slayer.
Buffy the Quarterback Slayer needs no explanation.
Yep. Given to me by Adrian Clem, who is the O-line coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But at that point, he was not yet there yet. But he's a good friend of mine who played for the Patriots, and he used to bring his sons to watch me play. But I call him Clementine, and he calls me Buffy.
Very sweet. I bet in your time in football, you've probably picked up quite a few nicknames.
Yes. Not all of them are up for public consumption, though.
Fair enough. If you were a superhero, which would you be?
So we actually went through this when I was with the Texas Revolution. They were all giving each other X-Men names, right? And, of course I walked up, and this is when I was coaching, and I was like, okay, so y'all are all these, super, who am I? And they were like, yo, that's so easy. And I was like, all right, who? And they're like, you are totally Dr. Jean Grey. Because,
the Phoenix. Yeah,
they're like, you've got that mind control. Like, we can all hear your voice in our head. And we all know the Phoenix is in there, and none of us wants to meet her. And I was like, that's right.
Well, my son is a bit of a Marvel DC junkie, and his favorites are all the women, but he says Jean Grey is the most powerful person in the Marvel universe. So
yes, she is.
Well,
so yeah, that is, and that was given to me by players. So
nice. What's your favorite song?
Oh gosh, I have so many, but I generally use as my walk-up song, Alu Black, I'm the Man.
I love it. Nice. First celebrity crush.
Ooh, gosh, first celebrity crush. I don't know. I know, like, when I was in high school, and you'll appreciate this, it wasn't really a celebrity crush, but I was like obsessed with Jackie Chan because yeah, I know. And I was like, that's why I was like, it's not really a celebrity crush. I love the fact that he did all his own stunts and he was funny, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, that's like the coolest dude. So I was like, and I remember that was like, if you could meet like an action hero or whatever, who would it be? And I'm like, Jackie Chan. And they were all like, what? I'm like, yeah, he's so awesome. Like, we would have so much fun. But celebrity crush of recent, I'd have to go with, like, I'm going to give it to Chadwick Boseman, because if you didn't have a crush on the Black Panther, like, you're not human. So love and prayers to his family. But like, he was somebody, he just seemed like magic, right? Like, everything he did was so heartfelt and sincere. You could feel his smile, right? Mm-hmm. I'm so big on smiles and like the sparkle in somebody's eyes. And he definitely had that.
Yeah, you know what? My life paralleled his a little bit over the past couple of years. I survived; he did not, and I wish he had. I
did not know. Well, I am glad that you survived.
In my rearview mirror, but yeah, that was hard to hear about him. Excellent.
Yeah. I was floored.
Yeah, but I respect his privacy, and I wish I would have been able to maintain a little bit of that myself. But it all works out, right?
It does.
Ask for permission or forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
Yes. And then two things. Advice for our sport management students that are watching.
Ooh, there's a lot. One, really find it's not just being in sports, right? Like, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be in sports. Well, but what do you want to be in sports? What are you really good at, and how is it interconnected with sports? Because it may be that you work at an outside company and you work on their sports division. It also may be that, you work in one way that will help prepare you more for what you want to do. So a lot of people say, I want to work in sports, right? It sounds really good. It sounds really sexy. So if you know that you're going into a highly competitive field, find a way to make yourself a unique value proposition. Okay. I'll say that again. Make yourself a unique value proposition. This is why when I was playing football, I got my master's degree and my PhD, because there was no path for a woman in football at that time. But what I thought is, if I could take my practical experience as one of the best in the world, even though we weren't being compensated for it, you can't take away the fact that I've done all of this at the highest level, right? And if I could take that and put it with the theoretical knowledge, then there wasn't anybody else like that in the sports space, particularly not in football, that I could see. And then as you see things that will make you more valuable and more fluent, even if it's not what you want to do, invest the time to learn it. And I say that because, I remember the moment when I was getting referred guys who were getting ready for the combine and the draft. And they wanted me to work with them on the psychology level. And I realized I couldn't help them to the extent that I wanted to, because I'd never been through the draft process and the combine process. So I didn't know from the empathetic standpoint of how scouts were evaluating them well enough to be able to advise them. So what I did is I sought out a course at Sports Management Worldwide that was their football scouting and general management course. So I learned what it was like to put a team together and how to do a scouting report and all that stuff. Now, I had no intention of, being a scout. And first of all, there was no, there had been one, but there wasn't yet women in that capacity anyway. But I took it because I wanted to be able to be an expert for the guys I was working with. However, the fact that I developed that talent absolutely helped me not only in the psychology, but then when I was in coaching situations, I had more knowledge because I had learned that. So don't be afraid to add value, even if it doesn't seem to be directly in what you want, because every part that you learn is going to help you figure out better where you fit in the space. Get mentorship opportunities if you can, right? Find people to work with, volunteer. I've had more free jobs than I will admit to, or probably should admit to, but it's different. And I say that because for me, I have a lot of people who ask me to, write a recommendation letter for them or something. And I always say, if I haven't worked with you, I can't do it because I can't make you more attractive. I can't speak to your work ethic. I haven't been out there with you. And I would be doing you a disservice if I agreed to do that without being able to add value. And so I always use who will volunteer as a way for me to filter through who's really serious. So, if there's an area of sports that you think you're really going to like, find ways to be as hands-on with it as possible. And develop relationships in the space because it is definitely a relationship-based business. It's not just what you know, it's who knows what you know and who knows how you work, right? Is this somebody that I could see spending long days with? Is this somebody who I like having around? I don't mind teaching some stuff, but do I like the attitude that they take when you're like, hey, no, I need it this way? No, that's not going to cut it. Right? It's not, your drama is not. So make sure that you can really get into it because there are so many different directions. It's not one size fits all, and relationships above all.
Spectacular advice. Okay, so now the most fun part of the entire interview, because you are now officially an honorary Gator. Congratulations. And with that, we're going to ask you to bring, that's right, for our students and the entire Gator Nation, a big Go Gators with a big old chomp. And the chomp is right arm up and down. So Dr. Welter.
All right. Well, gosh, Boston College will be mad at me for this, but Go Gators. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going the wrong way.
You go like cha-cha.
There you go. You got the 360 view.
I love it. It's an easy move. Works for everybody. We're always eager to expand the Gator Nation. So I really appreciate your time. I know I enjoyed it. I'm sure a lot of other people benefited from it. Where can people find you?
At JWelter47 on Twitter, Welter47 on Instagram. Also, GrrridIron Girls is on Instagram, but it's got 3 R's because it's kind of got a little grr to it, right? So, and then Dr. Jen Welter on Facebook, Welter47 on LinkedIn, and JenWelter.com.
You're amazing, Jen, and I really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time for us. And for everyone out there, thank you so much. Go Gators, and we'll look forward to the next interesting person in sports in March. Take care, everybody. Bye. Bye. Jen.
Bye.